Hello guys, this is your friend Naruto Audio Fanfics and we are back with a new fanfic. Which is what if Naruto was raised by Kurenai with Anko and Hinata by his side, the Ice Fox of Konoha, Part 1. And if you enjoy this fanfic then please press the like button and subscribe to my channel for more fanfic like this. And now let's start the fanfic. Woman walked down the Konoha streets road. She had just come from a small get-together with her best friend Anko Mitarashi, the famed snake mistress of Konoha. She had on a hard glare across her face while some of the men around the village leered at her. Her gaze was cold, but how could it not be? She hated perverts and the like. She was in her mid-20s while her red eyes showed the unrelenting coldness. She went by multiple names. People called her the Genjutsu Mistress, the Untouchable Woman, and her personal favorite, the Ice Queen of Konoha. Her name was Kurenai Yuhi and she was currently walking back to her apartment. She ignored the glances of the male population while she brushed her hair. Sigh. Why did I stay out so late with Anko? Man, she can drink. Now I have a headache, Kurenai said as she rubbed her head. She hadn't really drunk so much as her friend since she was never much of a drinker to begin with, but she still felt the after effects of the alcohol. Kurenai continued to walk towards her apartment while mentally cursing Anko for persuading her to go for a drink with her, but those thoughts were immediately put to rest when she saw a multitude of people come out of a dark alley. She might have been slightly drunk, but even she could get serious even if she was under the influence of alcohol. Kurenai raised an eyebrow as she saw them run away fast, but she also saw that they had weapons in their hands. Kurenai, being curious, walked into the dark alley and after a few seconds she widened her eyes. She saw a blonde boy around the age of 6 on the ground with his body torn and beaten. Kurenai narrowed her eyes as she carefully flipped him over and slowly checked his pulse. She was so happy he was alive, but just barely. She noticed the whisker marks on his face and widened her eyes again. She was staring at Naruto Uzumaki as she knew the container of the Kyuubi no Yoko. Kurenai knew about Kyuubi. She remembered how she wanted to fight with her father to stop it from destroying the village, but she and her friends were too young so they couldn't go. It was one of Kurenai's most memorable moments even if she didn't like it. Naruto winced at her touch, but slowly calmed down while Kurenai clenched her right fist. She might not have seen Naruto that much, but she didn't hold anything to the blonde. More or less she felt sorry for him and having to carry such a burden. He's only 6 and they do something like this. Hokage-sama, is this really the village we all fight to protect? Kurenai wondered as she slowly picked up the blonde boy and walked him towards the hospital. She wasn't about to let him die like this. Kurenai could feel something when she touched him. A small feeling that made her drop her cold gaze for a bit. People watched the Ice Queen of Konoha carry the famed demon brat to wherever she was going and most scowled and whispered things that didn't fail to enter her ears. Kurenai turned to the people talking and glared at them, making them all shut their mouths while she continued walking. Some people wanted to smack the demon brat out of her hands, but people knew that she might have been a chunin, but Kurenai was quickly gaining a reputation even with amongst the Jonin shinobi, so all the civilians backed off and allowed the woman to run towards her destination. Somewhere else. He was known as a lot of things. He was called the god of shinobi, the professor, and besides the Nadaime Tsuchikage, he was the oldest Hokage in office to date. His name was Sarutobi Hiruzen and he was walking down Konoha's streets enjoying a nice walk. He was on his way to Naruto's house to check up on the blonde. Sarutobi wondered what he was up to and simply decided to surprise Naruto with his arrival. Hiruzen continued to walk as he greeted the citizens of Konoha before he heard a yell along with a sharp rise in key. "What do you mean you won't help him?" Someone yelled and Sarutobi turned around to see the noise came from the hospital that Konoha was slightly famous for. Wondering what the problem was, Sarutobi walked towards the building and hoped that whatever happened he could resolve it peacefully and with no conflicts. He entered the door and saw Kurenai at the front desk, and he was about to intervene before he looked a little lower and saw the Genjutsu mistress holding a beaten Naruto in her hands. Sarutobi widened his eyes and quickly ran to the front desk, surprising both the receptionist and Kurenai at the same time. Naruto-kun, Sarutobi said as he looked over the passed-out blonde's bruises and injuries. Sarutobi narrowed his eyes and his ki completely suppressed Kurenai's, making all the staff members drop their things. Get him a doctor right now, Sarutobi ordered, and knowing how people were with the Hokage, the receptionist quickly agreed, and immediately a small team of medical nin took the blonde and started to heal his injuries while Kurenai and Sarutobi sat near the window to make sure no one tried anything with Naruto, which Sarutobi knew might happen, while Kurenai had a woman's hunch that it could happen. As they watched the medics work on Naruto, Sarutobi leaned forward and rested his chin on his arms while looking at the blonde. What happened, Kurenai? Hiruzen asked, making his voice strangely calm, but Kurenai knew better. She could tell that Sarutobi was angry and he was ready to lash out at the first thing that he directed his gaze on. Meanwhile, Kurenai narrowed her eyes and sat in an upright position as she felt the alcohol leave her body, with her becoming more and more sober. I don't know it all, Hokage-sama. I saw about 10 people come out of a dark alley and they ran off immediately. I thought it was strange, so I investigated and saw Naruto on the ground beaten. I rushed him to the hospital. I demanded that they heal him, but people said that they had too many people to take care of and couldn't tend to him at the moment since they were understaffed, but I knew it was a lie because I saw the other doctors and nurses taking their time and writing documents, so I was angry, Kurenai explained, and Sarutobi gritted his teeth. His hands clenched upon each other as he tried to get his anger under control. Kurenai sighed and turned to Sarutobi. He's only 6. How could they do that to him? Kurenai asked, and Hiruzen wasn't even sure how to answer that question even if he was called the professor. It's all my fault. I should have watched him better. I can't believe it got to this point, Sarutobi said, and Kurenai sighed. She had been guilty of not paying Naruto much attention either. Where are his parents? Kurenai asked, and Sarutobi shook his head before rubbing the bridge of his nose with his fingers. He doesn't have any. He's an orphan, but I was told how he was treated back at the orphanage, so I tried to see if he would be okay on his own, Sarutobi said, and Kurenai's hair covered her eyes. If one looks closely, they would see that her red eyes showed anger and slight resentment. How was he treated in the orphanage? Kurenai asked, wondering if she would dread that question. Sarutobi sighed, and while they watched the medics work, he told Kurenai the entire story. Needless to say, Kurenai had to keep all of her ki under control and not go straight to the orphanage and put everyone under a strong genjutsu that would leave them with mental trauma for years. He was only a child as they did all that to him. They isolated him from other kids, they ignored his needs, he was given a pathetic excuse for a bed, and he was barely given any food. This was unacceptable. And you thought it was okay for him to live on his own? He's 6. Kurenai yelled out, shocking Sarutobi. Hiruzen narrowed his eyes and glared at the Chunin woman. There wasn't much I could do at the time. Sarutobi yelled back while Kurenai looked at Naruto. Why couldn't he be adopted by anyone? Kurenai asked, and Sarutobi sighed while looking at Naruto also. They saw the blonde's breathing ease. After a while they calmed down and Kurenai sat back down looking at the ground. I'm sorry, Hokage-sama, she said, knowing she showed disrespect to her village's leader and her leader as well. Sarutobi gave a small smile and shook his head. No, you're right, Kurenai. The council breathed down my neck about Naruto and it was hard to come to a solution to it all. I know I probably made the wrong choice, Sarutobi said, and Kurenai mentally nodded in agreement with him, but she could tell he was regretting it. You're the Hokage, If you did something they couldn't stop you. Don't you know that Hokage-sama? Kurenai asked and Sarutobi nodded. He did know that, but he knew that people's hatred was a dangerous thing and he didn't know what family would be put in that line of fire just for being Naruto's adoptive parents. It's complicated Kurenai-san, so I'd rather not say, Sarutobi said, and Kurenai was visibly losing her patience as she wanted answers. She wasn't sure why she cared so much about the blonde, but this whole thing left a bad taste in her mouth when she kept hearing about all the things that happened to Naruto. He didn't deserve this. None of this was his fault and she knew it. She was mad. Mad at Konoha for being this was to a 4-year-old boy, mad at her Hokage for allowing this to happen, and mad at herself for being a part of that group that ignored him. She should have realized it. Naruto was the male version of Anko. Her best friend had the same childhood. When she was betrayed by Orochimaru, she was given almost the same treatment and still had to deal with most of it. Kurenai felt ashamed of herself for not seeing it all this time and looked at the ground. He's got no one taking care of him, right? Kurenai asked and Sarutobi nodded. He turned to her and saw Kurenai look at Naruto with absolute conviction and resolve in her eyes. Then, I'll take care of him from now on. Hokage-sama, I would like to adopt Naruto. He needs parents and I refuse to see him like that again. It will be tough, but I'll do it, Kurenai said, and Sarutobi widened his eyes at the Genjutsu mistress. She wanted to adopt Naruto. Kurenai, think about this. You're a shinobi and I don't think it would be wise to. Sarutobi stopped when he saw Kurenai's eyes. The fire burning in them that showed no room for discussion even if he was her Hokage. Sarutobi widened his eyes as Kurenai gave him a pleading look. The Hokage sighed and thought it over. He knew things couldn't stay with Naruto and maybe the blonde would be better if he had someone capable to look after him. He couldn't really see anything wrong with Kurenai doing it, since even if few women her age had children when they were that young. Are you sure about this, Kurenai-san? You will have a lot to do, Sarutobi said, and Kurenai looked back at Naruto. She knew next to nothing about the blonde, but she felt her heart tighten when she heard of all the things that happened to him. In her mind, it just wasn't fair for the blonde to have to experience that. I'm sure Hokage-sama. I'll manage with him. I always wanted company, Kurenai said, and Sarutobi chuckled, drawing the Ice Queen's attention to him. I never thought you would be so open. Especially with how most of Konoha talks about you, Sarutobi said, and Kurenai gave a small smile. I suppose so. Don't ask why though, Hokage-sama, Kurenai responded, and the Hokage laughed with a nod. He normally wouldn't pry into anything if it wasn't life-threatening, so he left it alone before sighing. Take care of him, Kurenai-san. He's been through a lot, Sarutobi said, and Kurenai nodded with a smile. She could honestly say that she was looking forward to having Naruto around. I know he has Hokage-sama, but I'll raise him right, Kurenai said, and Sarutobi nodded. He was sure that Kurenai would do a good job for the blonde. A few hours later, Naruto groaned as he woke up and looked at the ceiling. He didn't remember much of what happened, and or maybe he didn't want to remember. The blonde covered his eyes and cried at his misfortune. Why was he hated? What did he do that people hated him for? Naruto could only cry his distress away, but soon he felt a small side of his bed support something other than him, and the blonde opened his eyes to see Kurenai staring at him with a gentle smile on her face. Hello, Naruto-kun, Kurenai said, and the blonde looked at her for a bit. Kurenai could tell he was confused. She could understand that much, and she knew he had every right to be confused. Who are you? Naruto asked, and Kurenai continued to smile. I'm Kurenai. You here, if you want you can call me Ka-san, Kurenai said, and Naruto seemed even more confused, but Kurenai didn't mind it at all. Naruto-kun, I know what they did to you and I'm sorry you had to go through that. You didn't deserve any of that. Hokage-sama allowed me to adopt you. It might be confusing now, but you'll understand someday. For now I want you to know that I'm here for you, Kurenai said, and Naruto stared at her. He almost couldn't believe his ears when she said that. He almost hoped it wasn't a dream when she spoke to him like that. Why would you want to help me? The blonde asked, and Kurenai was more than happy to respond to his question. Because I care about you. I promise I'm not lying when I say this to you. Trust me, Naruto-kun, Kurenai said as she grabbed Naruto into a gentle hug. The blonde seemed stunned by her offer and felt overwhelmed, but at the same time very happy. For some reason he could feel she was telling the truth and he believed her. It felt good to have someone say that to him after all he had been through. Naruto slowly raised his arms and hugged his new adoptive mother and cried like it was a dream. Kurenai smiled and let down her cold gaze since she had no need for it with her new son. Is it really alright if I call you Ka-san? I mean, our hair color is so different and so are our eyes, and Kurenai placed a finger over Naruto's mouth and simply continued to smile. Don't worry about those details, Naru-kun. You're my new son and I'll take care of you. I might not know a lot, but I know I can help you, Kurenai said, and Naruto smiled. The blonde crashed into Kurenai again and showed his smile to his mother. Ka-san, thank you, Naruto said, and Kurenai smiled again. It warmed her heart to see Naruto so happy for a change. Alright then, you get some more sleep. I'll be right in that chair if you need or want me, Kurenai said as she took a chair near the window. Naruto yawned and went back to sleep while Kurenai turned out the lights. She slowly drifted off to sleep also as she folded her arms around her body and plopped on leg over the other in her chair. 2 days later, Kurenai shook Naruto awake and the blonde groaned as the sun shined on his face while Kurenai took in his appearance. So much happened last night, but she didn't care at all. Wake up, Naruto-kun. It's time to go, Kurenai said, and the blonde slowly opened his eyes. He turned to see his adoptive mother in front of him and Naruto smiled as he yawned. Good morning, Ka-san, Naruto said, and Kurenai nodded. Good morning, Naru-kun. Are you ready to leave? Kurenai asked, and Naruto nodded. He had spent the last 2 days resting his body and it amazed Kurenai that he was already better, but she knew it was from Kyuubi and its healing abilities. Yeah, Ka-san, I'm ready to leave Dadbao, Naruto said, and Kurenai raised an eyebrow at the last word, but it seemed to be kind of cute so she didn't mind it at all. Alright then, let's get you signed out, Kurenai said as she took her son's hand and the two left the hospital room. Naruto was more than happy to leave the hospital as he had always hated it there. He felt that they were always out to get him, but he felt much better with Kurenai with him. After signing her son out, Kurenai took Naruto through the village and almost immediately they drew attention as most of Konoha went wide-eyed. They saw Kurenai, the Genjutsu mistress and ice queen of Konoha, holding the demon's hand with a sure smile on her face. People were stunned at the scene. Some women called Kurenai a demon lover, but it didn't matter at all to the woman. She was happy with her new son. Naruto felt the stares on them and it unnerved him slightly as he unconsciously moved behind Kurenai as if he was trying to hide, making the Genjutsu mistress smile. Naru-kun, what are you doing? Kurenai asked and the blonde gave an embarrassed smile. Everyone's staring at us, Ka-san, Naruto said, and Kurenai nodded, but she didn't care. Not in the least of what people thought before she smirked. So you care about what they think instead of being with me? Kurenai asked and Naruto panicked. No, Ka-san, it's just sort of weird, Naruto said, and Kurenai nodded. Well, it won't matter soon. 'Cause you'll be with me from now on, Kurenai said, and Naruto couldn't help but agree with her. Soon Kurenai's first test came up as a Jonin narrowed his eyes at her and stepped forward. Kurenai and Naruto stopped in front of the man as the Ice Queen narrowed her eyes at him while he spoke. What do you think you're doing with that thing? The Jonin asked, and Kurenai's gaze got colder while she tightened her grip on Naruto's hand. The blonde looked at his mother while the citizens of Konoha whispered to each other. 1. Don't you dare call my son a thing, and 2. What I do with my son is none of your business, Kurenai said, shocking everyone who heard her. The Jonin narrowed his eyes even more while Kurenai pushed Naruto a bit more back behind her. Is that all you wanted to ask? Kurenai asked, making the Jonin mentally curse. She then continued to walk as she passed the Jonin without any more conversation. Naruto widened his eyes as Kurenai dragged him away from the scene. Ka-san, you were so cool, Datbeo, Naruto said, making Kurenai smile. That was the only time that someone had complimented her on her intense gaze that she fed people. Thank you, Naruto-kun. Now then, let's head to your new house, then we will get some scrolls so we can get the things from your old apartment, Kurenai told him, and Naruto nodded, so Kurenai quickened the pace. After 15 minutes of walking, Kurenai took Naruto to a nice apartment that didn't look rundown at all. It looked brand new actually. Kurenai and Naruto climbed up the stairs and came up to her door. Welcome home, Naruto-kun, Kurenai said as she opened the door. Naruto walked inside and gasped. It was nothing like his old apartment. It was larger, had more than one room, and looked amazing. Naruto thought it might have been a dream had he not been experiencing this for himself. The blonde ran around the room while laughing, making Kurenai giggle. Ka-san, it's amazing. My apartment is nothing like this. Am I really going to be staying here? Naruto asked, making Kurenai chuckle. Of course you're silly. Now then, wait here and I'll get some scrolls, then we'll leave, Kurenai said, walking away while Naruto looked around the room. He was surprised that it wasn't as girly or womanly as he thought it might have been, but Naruto was sort of relieved. He looked around and sat on the couch that was in the living room next to the coffee table. Wow, Ka-san's place is really neat, Naruto said as he sank into the couch. He'd never felt anything so comfortable in his life. Just before he could submit to the softness of the couch, there was a knock on the door and the blonde raised an eyebrow. He wondered if he should answer it or what Kurenai would do. Naruto shrugged his shoulders and opened the door and was greeted to a woman a few inches shorter than his adoptive mother. She was wearing a trench coat and fishnets around her body, and she had pink hair with a dango stick sticking out her mouth. Hey kid, who are you? The woman asked, and Naruto raised an eyebrow. He wasn't sure how to answer that, but luckily he wouldn't have to as Kurenai came back. Naruto-kun, who's at the door? Kurenai asked, only to see her friend at the door in front of her son. Anko, Kurenai said, making Naruto and Anko turn to her. Naruto turned back to the woman and widened his eyes in realization. So her name was Anko. Nai-chan, I came to see you. Who is this little guy? Anko asked, and Kurenai smiled as she knelt down and wrapped her arms around the blonde before smiling towards her best friend. This is Naruto Uzumaki. He's my son, Kurenai said, and Anko nodded. Silence came over the room as the information came into Anko's head. He's what? Anko said, making Kurenai smile with a nod that she wasn't kidding. Anko gasped and looked at Naruto. Nai-chan, this is huge. Are you sure you can handle that? Anko asked, and Kurenai nodded. Of course, Anko. I take care of you just fine on occasion, Kurenai said, making Naruto snicker at the purple-haired woman's shocked face. How did he become yours? Anko asked, and Kurenai told Anko the whole story of how she found Naruto and her talk with the Sandaime Hokage about adopting Naruto, and needless to say, Anko was even more surprised. Whoa, Nai-chan. I didn't know you had it in you, Anko said while Kurenai's eyebrow twitched. The Chunin huffed while Anko smiled at Naruto, making the blonde smile back at her. So if he's your son, then can I be his sister? Anko asked, making Kurenai raise an eyebrow. Anko's eyes gave a pleading look while Kurenai sighed. Somewhere in her head this was a horrible idea, but she relented. Fine Anko, you can be Naruto-kun's sister I guess, though I don't see why, Kurenai said, and Anko's grin got bigger. Are you kidding, Nai-chan? Anko asked as she sped to Naruto and gave him a hug, making the blonde blush. I've always wanted a little brother with whisker marks, Anko said, and Naruto's face turned blue. Can't breathe, Nai-chan, Naruto said before Anko dropped him with a smile while Kurenai sighed. So what are you two going to do? Anko asked while Kurenai took out a scroll. She turned to see Naruto next to her and smiled. We're going to start packing Naruto's clothes from his old apartment. I have an extra room near mine that I never use, though it was mainly used for you when you passed out drinking, Kurenai said, making Anko give a nervous laugh while she scratched her cheek. Well, I've got nothing to do, so can I come? Anko asked, and Kurenai shrugged her shoulders. I suppose. Come on, Naru-kun, and show us to your apartment, Kurenai said, and Naruto nodded. He immediately ran off and they followed him. It turned out that Naruto's house wasn't so far from theirs, maybe about 10 minutes, and the sight of it made Kurenai and Anko narrow their eyes. It was old and seemed like it could be reconstructed, but it held out just fine. They all walked up the creaking stair boards until they came up to Naruto's door. Anko widened her eyes and Kurenai's gaze grew cold. Naruto's eyes turned sad as they saw that his door had been broken down. Across the walls were hateful remarks about the demon and how it could die or go to hell, something like that. Kurenai saw that Naruto's room was mostly clean, if not for the random kunai marks and notes which Kurenai and Anko tore down. Kurenai turned to her son and smiled. Don't worry, Naru-kun. I won't let anyone or anything hurt you, I promise, Kurenai said, and Naruto's mood instantly changed. He thanked his adopted mother and the three go to work on sealing the blonde's clothes into the scroll. He didn't have much and most of his clothes were old, so Kurenai decided to take him shopping after this while Anko would have some fun with whoever did this to her little brother's room. It took about half an hour, but everything of importance was sealed and the three left the old apartment. Alright, I'll take before we head back home. I think we'll take him shopping for some clothes, then we'll get something to eat to end the day, Kurenai stated while Anko and Naruto nodded, ignoring the many glares they got from people. Gotcha, Nai-chan. Come on, Naru-kun, let's get you some clothes, Anko said as she grabbed Naruto's hand and the three walked for a clothes store. As soon as they came to one, all three entered the shop and were met with a smile that quickly turned into a frown when he saw Naruto. Obviously Kurenai and Anko noticed his frown and glared. That thing isn't allowed in here, the man said simply while Kurenai's hair covered her eyes again. Anko, take Naruto-kun outside. I've got to teach this man a lesson, Kurenai said, and Anko nodded as she grabbed Naruto and took him outside while Kurenai smiled. Let me show you why I'm called the Genjutsu Mistress of Konoha and why you never insult my son, Kurenai said as the man was about to find out that he made the worst mistake of his life. Anko and Naruto waited outside for a few minutes before Kurenai smiled and allowed them inside. Naruto and Anko smiled and walked inside while the man was smiling like he just saw death flash before his eyes. Take anything you want. It's on the H house, he said, and Kurenai nodded. She and Anko grabbed countless clothes and had Naruto try on a few of them for their amusement. After about an hour, the three left and Naruto's stomach began to rumble. It was the middle of the day, so that was understandable. Are you hungry, Naruto-kun? Kurenai asked and her adoptive son nodded. Anko's stomach grumbled too, which made Kurenai sigh. Great, so are you. Well, I don't have my supplies, so I can't really cook, Kurenai said with a sigh while Naruto's eyes gleamed. Ka-san, can we get some ramen? Naruto asked, making Kurenai and Anko raise their eyebrows at him. Ramen would be a good change of pace, Nai-chan. Let's get some, Anko said, agreed with her new little brother. Kurenai looked from her son to her best friend and sighed. Well, alright. I don't mind. Let's go then, Kurenai said as Naruto pointed his mother and sister towards his favorite. With Sarutobis. The god of shinobi was currently in the council room dealing with the ramblings of his council members, which irritated him to no end. Sarutobi sighed as he placed his chin on his elbows and his elbows on the table. Now that this matter is over, what should we do about that blonde brat? A civilian said, making the shinobi side narrow their eyes. They were comprised of all the clans of Konoha. There was the Yamanaka, Inuzuka, Hyuga, Uchiha, Nara, Aburame, and Akamichi. Of these clans were Inoichi, Sume, Hiashi, Makoto, Shikaku, Shibi, and Shuza. That brat has a name, just so you know, Sume said, growling at them all. I don't care what you call him. The brat is just a brat. Come on, Sarutobi, you know about his problem. We should get rid of him now, a councilwoman said, making Sarutobi narrow his eyes. That's Hokage-sama to you, and you won't do anything to Naruto-kun, Sarutobi said, making Sume and Makoto smile. Maybe I could adopt, Sume started, but was stopped by Sarutobi's old teammate, Koharu Utatane. Absolutely not. He should be left alone as he always has been, Koharu said, making Sume growl, but Hiruzen was smirking as he got a drop on the council. Besides Sume-san, it hardly matters now, Sarutobi said, turning everyone's attention to him, making Makoto and Sume raise an eyebrow. What do you mean, Hokage-sama? Makoto asked, interested in hearing what their Hokage had to say, and so did everyone else. Even Konoha's old war hawk, Danzo Shimura, was interested in this one. Naruto-kun has already been adopted, Sarutobi said, making everyone widen their eyes, especially the civilian council members. Sume and Makoto seemed more surprised than anyone else. What? Who would adopt that thing? A man said, making Sarutobi glare at him. He's not a thing, and I think the woman who adopted him as her son wouldn't like it if you called him a thing, Sarutobi said, making everyone tense. Hokage-sama who adopted Naruto Uzumaki. I believe we should know this information, Hiashi said in a stoic form, making everyone nod in complete agreement with him. Alright Hiashi, since you and the other want to know so badly, then I'll tell you. As of 2 days ago, Naruto Uzumaki was adopted by Kurenai Yuhi, our Genjutsu mistress. All of the paperwork has been finalized by me also, Sarutobi said, drawing gasps from everyone on the council. That woman adopted that brat. Someone said, making Sarutobi nod. We should stop her right now. Another person said before Sume slammed the desk. I don't think so. If she adopted him, then it's fine with me. Kurenai has the support of the Inuzuka clan, Sume said while Makoto stood to her feet. As well as the Uchiha clan, Makoto said to everyone. Most people gulped and dropped the issue since the Uchihas were still quite influential, even if it was only Makoto and her son, Sasuke Uchiha. But someone started. No buts. Unless you want to fight me, then you'll leave Kurenai and Naruto alone, Makoto said, and Sume backed her up, making Sarutobi chuckle with a nod. Well, if that's all, then this meeting is adjourned, he said, and left while most were still stunned at the news. With Kurenai, Naruto, and Anko. All three were heading back home while Naruto and Anko rubbed their stomach. Naruto wasn't kidding. That Tsuki sure can cook some ramen, Anko said, and Naruto nodded along with Kurenai. It was delicious, wasn't it? Kurenai said, and Naruto tugged his mother's arm. Ka-san, do you think I can be like you and Nei-chan? Naruto asked, making Kurenai and Anko raise their eyebrows. What do you mean, Naruto-kun? Kurenai asked, and the blonde blushed slightly. I want to make you two proud. I want to be a shinobi. Please teach me, Ka-san, Nei-chan, Naruto said as Kurenai and Anko looked at each other. Anko grinned and shrugged her shoulders. It's your call, Nai-chan. He's your son, Anko said, making Kurenai smile. All right, Naruto-kun. We'll train you, but you must work hard and no complaining, Kurenai said, and Naruto's eyes beamed as he hugged his mother. You got it, Ka-san. I'll make you and Nei-chan proud, Dadbao. Naruto yelled as he grinned. Kurenai ruffled his hair while Anko smiled. Things are getting interesting, Anko said, and Kurenai nodded as the three walked off to their homes to prepare for the next day in Naruto's training. Next morning, Naruto groggily woke up and yawned himself awake. The blonde rubbed his head before he took in his surroundings. The blonde widened his eyes when he remembered the events that happened yesterday. He had just gained a mother and he was more than happy about that. He also got an older sister, and while she was kind of weird, Naruto still liked her nonetheless. He also felt well rested in his new bed that Kurenai gave him. He hadn't had such a good sleep in such a long time, especially in such a comfortable bed like he had. I wonder if Ka-san's up, Naruto said before he smelled something cooking. His stomach grumbled and the blonde gulped as he stood to his feet. He quickly walked to the door and opened it to see Kurenai setting plates while humming a soft morning tone. Naruto smiled at his mother's singing and walked close, alerting the genjutsu mistress to her adoptive son's presence. I see I didn't need to wake you up, Kurenai said, and Naruto sheepishly grinned as he sat at the table. Kurenai followed in suit and placed a glass of fresh milk in front of Naruto. The blonde looked at it, then back at his mother. I thought you might like some Western food for a change, Kurenai said, placing some toast, eggs on the table in front of him. Thank you, Ka-san, Naruto said as he took a fork and started to eat the delicious breakfast in front of him while Kurenai sipped some coffee. She smiled at her son's behavior and wondered how long it had been before he ever had a home-cooked meal. She only had herself and maybe Anko to go by when it came to cooking, but the look of joy on Naruto's face told her that she had done a good job with the breakfast. Naruto looked up from his food to see Kurenai smiling at him, and the blonde blushed as he took a bite of his toast. Ka-san, why aren't you eating anything? Naruto asked, and Kurenai giggled, which made Naruto more confused, but he waited for his mother's reply. I don't eat this early. I just need my cinnamon coffee for right now, Kurenai said, and Naruto wondered what that could have tasted like, but he forgot it after a while and drank his milk, which ended his breakfast. Kurenai watched as her son picked up his dishes and walked towards the sink and started to clean the dishes, which really surprised the Ice Queen while she drank her coffee. Wow, Naru-kun, I didn't expect you to wash the dishes, Kurenai said, and Naruto allowed a smile to come across his face. He turned to his mother and gave her a thumbs up. I had to wash the little bit of dishes I had back in my old apartment, and I want to do what I can to make you happy, even if it's this, Naruto said, placing one clean dish on the counter, making Kurenai smile at her son for not acting like most 6-year-old boys. He knows how to be responsible. Normal boys his age would immediately go outside to play. That's my son, Kurenai thought before getting up and placing her coffee cup in the sink, and Naruto turned to that next. It was then that Kurenai grabbed Naruto into a small hug, which made the blonde pause from washing the dishes. Naruto-kun, when you're done, I want you to get dressed in some of your new clothes. We're going to see Hokage-sama today and tell him about your training. Anko will be coming with us also. After we leave the Hokage mansion, we're going to go to the library and start your training with us, alright? Kurenai asked, and Naruto nodded, understanding his mother's words. So on that note, Kurenai released her son and went into her room to go get dressed. Naruto finished the dishes and went into his room also. Naruto rummaged through his closet and looked at all the new clothes he had. He still couldn't believe this, his mother managed to get all this stuff for free yesterday. It really made him wonder what she did, but he didn't care. He was just happy that she cared that much about him to get him these clothes. The blonde put on a black short jeans and a red sleeveless shirt which really reminded him of his mother's eyes. He also wore the black Anbu shoes that his mother got him and checked over his body. He went into the bathroom and brushed his teeth. Naruto came out of his room and waited for his mother to arrive as he sat on the couch. He didn't even have to wait long before saw Kurenai appear in a red mesh blouse armor and over that was a white bandaged-looking dress that came down to her thighs. Looking very good, Naru-kun. Well, are you ready to go? Kurenai asked and Naruto nodded with his mother. She grabbed his hand and walked towards the door, but immediately there was a knock coming which made Kurenai and Naruto raise their eyebrows. The Genjutsu mistress opened the door and both smiled when they saw who it was. Looks like I'm right on time, Anko said, making Kurenai and Naruto nod at her. Ka-san and I were about to leave. It's good to see you again, Anko-ni-chan, Naruto said, which caused Anko to give him a hug. It's good to see you too, Naruto-kun. So what are we waiting for? Let's go, Anko said and Kurenai nodded in agreement with her best friend. Alright then, let's hit the streets, Anko said, grinning like mad, making Naruto chuckle and Kurenai sigh. She wondered how she was going to handle Naruto's growth with Anko being an influence like she was. As they walked through the trees, Anko and Kurenai could feel the glares more than usual, but they still didn't mind. Kurenai ignored them as usual since she was sort of used to being glared at, but for a different reason, while Anko glared right back at people as she twirled a kunai in her hands. Naruto shrunk under the stairs, making his mother and older sister worry about him and see that Anko grinned. Hey Naruto, wanna see a good prank? Anko asked and Naruto instantly gave her the attention she wanted. Kurenai glared at Anko, wondering if she was about to do something that would give her a headache so early. Anko walked up to a civilian man who had been glaring at them and smiled. Hey sir, good morning to you, Anko said while the man narrowed his eyes at Anko's smirk. Naruto felt a prank coming while the man responded. What do you want, demon lover? The man asked and Anko's smile slightly waved while she grew a tick mark on her head. She slowly patted the man on the back and continued to smile. Just wanted to say good morning to you is all, Anko said, walking off, confusing the man as he continued to glare at them. Meanwhile, Anko and the others walked away as she held up 3 fingers to Naruto. 3, 2, 1, Anko counted and immediately the blonde and 2 Chunin heard a yell and turned around to see a snake slithering around the man's neck, making him yell his lungs out while the other civilians screamed and ran from him before they got bit, which caused Anko and Naruto to burst out laughing and Kurenai to slightly giggle. Anko, nay, that was awesome. I thought he was going to pass out from the shock, Naruto said, making Anko ruffled her little brother's hair. Yep. I have a lot more that I could show you. Don't think you're the only prankster in Konoha, Anko said while Kurenai smiled at them. Anko, Naruto, unless I give permission, don't do that again, Kurenai said while Anko sighed at Kurenai's slightly boring sense. Alright Ka-san, Naruto said, not wanting to upset her. Anko nodded also and Kurenai gave a true smile as they walked towards the Hokage mansion, leaving the screaming masses behind. Hokage mansion. Sarutobi sighed as he went through some of the paperwork that he was doing. It was a gruesome thing that every Kage had to endure, but he still hated it, and to think he could be reading his favorite Ika Ika book. He remembered how many of the council members came into his office yesterday about Naruto being adopted by Kurenai, but he told them that he had filled out the paperwork and made sure that it was safe simply because he always kept it near him. He knew that the group of people who actually liked Naruto was really small and he had no idea who would tamper with the documents, so he always kept them with him, though where no one knew. It was then that he heard a knock at the door and stopped signing documents. Come in, he said, and was slightly relieved to have a break. The old Hokage was then surprised to see Anko, Kurenai and Naruto come through the door. His heart lightened when he saw Naruto smiling at Kurenai before everyone turned to him. Hey Gigi, how have you been? Naruto asked, making Kurenai raise an eyebrow and Anko to snicker at her little brother. Naru-kun, be respectful to Hokage-sama, Kurenai said, and Naruto apologized, but Sarutobi stopped Kurenai. No Kurenai-san, it's alright. He's always called me that and I hear enough Hokage-sama every day, so it's good to not hear it once in a while, Sarutobi said, and Kurenai nodded while Anko smiled. How about Sarutobi-sama? Anko asked, making a suggestion while Kurenai widened her eyes at how easy they were all talking with the Hokage. I don't see a problem with that. Now then, what can I help you three with? Sarutobi asked while Anko turned to Kurenai and gestured for her to proceed. Kurenai stepped forward and turned back to Naruto. Well, Sarutobi-sama, Naruto told us that he wants to be a shinobi, so Anko and I were considering training him, then I would enroll him in the academy when he was old enough, Kurenai stated, and Sarutobi turned to Naruto, who nodded in agreement with everything she said. The Sandaime took a puff of his smoke. Well, I certainly have no problem with him learning anything. Also, it's not like you had to come to me for confirmation. Since you are Naruto-kun's mother, you can train him at your leisure if you wanted, though knowing this is much better than not knowing. Well, is that it? Sarutobi asked, and Kurenai nodded. Well, that's good, but you really shocked everyone, Kurenai. If you saw how many people protested to you adopting Naruto-kun, I'm not sure what you would have done, Sarutobi said, and Kurenai sighed. It doesn't matter, Sarutobi-sama. Naruto-kun is my son and I won't let anyone take him, Kurenai said, and the Sandaime nodded with a gentle smile. So let me guess, Anko, you wanted a part in this also, Hiruzen said, and Anko chuckled. Yep. He's my little whisker-faced brother, Anko said, making Sarutobi sigh. He then turned to Naruto and watched the blonde laugh with his family. At least he's happy, Sarutobi thought before he heard another knock on the door. The Hokage sighed while Kurenai, Anko and Naruto turned their attention to the door. Come in, Sarutobi said, and the door opened, to which Naruto saw a man in his mid-20s just like Kurenai. His grayish hair and his Konoha headband covering one of his eyes. Hokage-sama, you wanted to see me? The man asked with a lazy expression. Kurenai and Anko rolled their eyes at his lazy attitude while Naruto tugged Kurenai's arm. Ka-san, who's that? Naruto asked, pointing to the man, and Kurenai narrowed her eyes as the man looked at her son. That man is the biggest pervert, Naruto-kun. He is Kakashi Hatake and he reads weird books. It's best if you avoid him, Kurenai said, making Naruto glare at the man. Kakashi sighed as he rubbed the back of his head with an eye smile. Come on, Kurenai, don't say that. You'd enjoy it too if you read it, Kakashi said, to which Kurenai glared at him coldly, making the Jonin sweat drop. Okay, I guess not, he said while Kurenai glared at Kakashi. Meanwhile, Naruto tugged Anko's trench coat, making the purple-haired woman kneel down to her brother as Naruto whispered into her ear. Does Ka-san have something against Kakashi? Naruto asked, and Anko smirked as she watched the exchange. Not that I know of, but she just acts that way with all perverts. It's not just Kakashi though, you know, Naruto, if you want to be like Kurenai then you should adopt her gaze also. Your blue eyes are the perfect form of coldness, just like Kurenai's, Anko whispered, making Naruto widen his eyes. He looked up at his mother's glare and mentally told himself that he would try to glare like that someday. The cough from Sarutobi stopped Kurenai's glare and Kakashi passed Kurenai. Naruto and Anko then bowed before his Hokage. Kakashi, why did you fail another team? Sarutobi asked, and Kakashi narrowed his eye. It's because they weren't fit to be shinobi, Hokage-sama, Kakashi said, and Sarutobi sighed. He took a deep puff of his smoke and turned to look out the window. Kakashi, that's the third team you failed. You said you wanted to teach the next generation, but you're making it difficult. Try and pass a team this time, Sarutobi said, and Kakashi nodded before walking towards the door, but then he stopped and turned to Kurenai. Well, Kurenai, congratulations on adopting Naruto. I guess despite your title as Konoha's Ice Queen you are quite soft, Kakashi said with a chuckle while Kurenai narrowed her eyes. At least Ka-san isn't a pervert jonin, Naruto suddenly said, making Kurenai widen her eyes and Anko snicker. Kakashi raised an eyebrow at the blonde while Naruto glared coldly at him. Kurenai giggled as she looked at her son's glare. He's not bad. That glare would make any normal kid flinch, Kurenai thought before Naruto grabbed her hand. Come on, Ka-san. You and Anko ne said you'd train me, so let's go, Naruto said, running out the door while holding Kurenai and Anko's hand. I think you just made him hate you, Sarutobi said, and Kakashi sighed with a nod. He honestly didn't mean anything by it, but he knew that he shouldn't have said it like that. Kurenai already tolerate him and his pervert tendencies as it was. He probably just made it worse. I never thought that Kurenai would adopt Naruto of all people, Kakashi said, and Sarutobi nodded. Yeah, it's a shocker, but I'm happy for him, Sarutobi said, and Kakashi shrugged his shoulder while he took out an orange book and walked off, leaving Sarutobi to his work. With Kurenai, Anko and Naruto having left the Hokage mansion, the group left the area and Kurenai grabbed Naruto's hand. She took him in the direction of the library while she turned to Anko. Anko, prepare our regular training ground for Naruto-kun. We'll be there later, Kurenai said, and Anko nodded as she gave Naruto a goodbye and hopped along the rooftops while Kurenai and her son walked into the library. They were both met with a bit of hostility, but there was nothing the civilians could do, so Naruto entered the library for the first time. He looked at the mountains of books in the shelves while Kurenai took him to the shinobi section of the library. Alright Naruto, what do you want to learn? We'll get the books, Kurenai said, and Naruto thought it over. He rubbed his head for a few minutes while Kurenai slowly waited for her son's response to her question. Well, Ka-san, I'd like to learn everything. I want to be a well-balanced shinobi. I heard lots of people calling you the genjutsu mistress, so I want that to be my primary art. I'd like to have taijutsu and ninjutsu just so I don't focus on one thing, Naruto said, and Kurenai chuckled, but she remembered Kyuubi's large chakra reserves, which gave Naruto nearly cage-level chakra just at the age he was. Genjutsu would be a bit of a struggle for him, but this was her son and the least she could do was believe it was possible and teach him. Well, Naru-kun, I'm glad you want to be well-rounded and you have two perfect teachers. Anko leans more to taijutsu and ninjutsu while I lean towards genjutsu and tactics. With your Ka-san and Ne-chan you will be a very well-balanced shinobi. Now then, we will get to work on your chakra control. Do you know what chakra is? Kurenai asked, and Naruto racked his brain. No, Ka-san, I'm sorry, Naruto said, and Kurenai patted his head. No problem, Naru-kun. For now I'll tell you and later I'll show it to you. Basically, chakra is the energy within our bodies. It's the thing that allows us to perform amazing techniques. In essence, chakra is a shinobi's best friend. Now then, let's get you some books. We'll mostly take some on chakra control and some on genin to chunin techniques, Kurenai told her son, and Naruto nodded as the genjutsu mistress handed Naruto the books, and when they were done they carried them out and walked towards a training ground. Ka-san, when did you start genjutsu? Naruto asked out of nowhere as they walked for a few minutes. Kurenai smiled and looked up at the sky. Maybe since I started the academy. There weren't many genjutsu users during that time and I had a peculiar knack for it, so I went with it. Mostly I wanted to prove that genjutsu was just as good as taijutsu or ninjutsu, Kurenai said, and Naruto nodded. That's a cool dream, Ka-san, Naruto said, and Kurenai giggled with a bit of thanks to her son. While they walked, Kurenai raised an eyebrow when she saw two other people walking. She knew the oldest right away while the younger she had a vague memory about. Of course she couldn't really forget them. They were the last of their clan after all. It was Makoto and her son Sasuke Uchiha. Naruto looked at Sasuke and the brunette looked at Naruto. They both shared a glance at each other as the two mothers stopped to talk. Kurenai-san, it's good to see you, Makoto said, and Kurenai nodded. She had seen Makoto around multiple times. There was a few other times that Anko and Yugao would invite herself and Makoto to a woman's night out. It's good to see you too. It was quite a shock when I learned what you did, Makoto said, taking a glance at Naruto, which Kurenai did notice. Well, that's life, isn't it? My son is quite responsible for his age, Kurenai said, smiling, and Makoto chuckled. Sasuke-chan's no slouch either, though I wish he wouldn't mop all the time, Makoto said, and Kurenai raised an eyebrow as to what she meant. Meanwhile, Naruto was staring at Sasuke and Sasuke was staring at Naruto. The two young boys glared at each other before the Uchiha spoke. What are you looking at? He asked while Naruto narrowed his eyes. Well, I'm looking at your mopey face. You need to lighten up, Naruto said, and Sasuke gritted his teeth at the blonde. HMPH, maybe you should mind your business, Sasuke returned, and Naruto's eyebrow twitched. This guy was seriously pissing the blonde off. Whatever, broody, Naruto said, and Sasuke gritted his teeth. He noticed the books in Naruto's hands and chuckled. So you want to be a shinobi? Please, I already know a jutsu, maybe you just suck, Sasuke said, and Naruto grabbed his collar. He scowled at the Uchiha while the brunette was sort of surprised by the action a little. Wanna say that to my face, emo? Naruto asked, and Sasuke grabbed Naruto's collar in return. Makoto and Kurenai watched the exchange and sighed. Boys would always be boys. Who you callin' an emo loser? Sasuke retorted, and both gritted their teeth at each other. I bet I could be a better ninja than you any day, Naruto said, and Sasuke scoffed. I'd like to see you try. When I become the best, I'll kick you so far around this village that you'll never get up again, Sasuke said, and Naruto was about to say something, but both boys got grabbed and pulled away from each other. Come, Sasuke. Be nice, Makoto said with a smile while Kurenai smiled at Naruto. Naruto, you too. Don't fight. Yet, Kurenai said, and Naruto nodded with a quick apology as the two ladies dragged their sons away from each other. Hey loser, I intend to win that bet. You better be up to it. Sasuke yelled across the streets, and Naruto gave a hidden grin. Just be prepared to lose when I beat you to a pulp dadbao. Naruto yelled, and he could have sworn that he saw Sasuke smirk. Meanwhile, Sasuke grabbed his mother's arm and quickly shot off for the Uchiha compound. Makoto was surprised at her son's strength in his grip as he pulled her along. Sasuke, what's gotten into you? Makoto asked, and Sasuke turned to her. Come on, Ka-san, we're training. I'm not letting that loser pass me, Sasuke said as he continued to drag his mother back to the compound, and Makoto saw a smile across his face. I'll have to thank Naruto-kun for that someday, Makoto said in thought as she ran with Sasuke to give him the training he wanted from her. While that was going on, Kurenai and Naruto entered the required training ground as they walked through the trees. Ka-san, train me hard or I'll never beat that Tem, Naruto said, and Kurenai giggled with a simple nod. That's fine and all, Naruto-kun, but don't forget that you must also train for yourself. To improve and exceed your limits as a shinobi, Kurenai told him, and Naruto nodded. I understand, Ka-san, Naruto said, and Kurenai nodded. They soon entered a lush field with a pond in the center of it. They saw Anko sitting on a tree branch waiting for them as they came into the field. Anko, nay, we're here, Naruto yelled, and the snake mistress smiled with a somersault to the ground. All right, I was almost tired of waiting. Now then, Nai-chan, what shall we do to help him with first? Anko asked, and Kurenai put the library books on the ground. Before we start anything, I think we should start Naruto-kun on some chakra control exercises. Maybe 2 hours of that, then we'll go into the basics for taijutsu, which should be for an hour, then another hour for ninjutsu, and we'll end the day with him reading about genjutsu, Kurenai told her friend, and Anko nodded. She turned to see Naruto staring at them and nodded. Alright then, Nai-chan. If I remember, you have a mission with some other chunin in an hour or so, right? Why don't you go and I'll take care of Naru-kun? Anko said, and Kurenai sighed. She knew Anko was right. It wasn't a mission that was long, it was just babysitting a prince for about half the day for some country. Alright, I guess I'll go. It shouldn't be long. Naruto-kun, listen to your sister and you'll learn a lot. For now I have to go do a mission, alright? Kurenai asked, and Naruto nodded. Alright, Ka-san. Be safe, Naruto said, and Kurenai responded with a light kiss on his forehead before she jumped to the trees and left the two alone. Well, I'm in your care, Anko-ne, Naruto said, making the snake mistress smile. Alright, Naru-kun, Kurenai wanted to start on chakra control. We will begin with a simple exercise. Simply balance this leaf on your forehead with nothing but chakra. It will take a while, but I know you'll get it. Just like this, Anko said, placing the leaf to her head as she sat in front of Naruto. The blonde watched the leaf stick, and it stayed on her forehead for about 3 minutes before it dropped. A Jonin can keep this up for about 3 hours flawlessly, while Chunin can do it for an hour. Now then, you try, Anko said, and Naruto nodded. He took a leaf and closed his eyes. During his walk with his mother, Naruto was taught how to direct chakra to the points in his body where he needed them. He had gotten lost on a few things, but he could tell what his mother was talking about. So the blonde wasn't entirely confused on the matter. Naruto sighed and slowly tried to channel chakra to his forehead as he stuck the leaf on it. The blonde slowly removed his hand as Anko watched him. She was amazed that it didn't fall immediately, but after a minute or so it did, while Naruto pouted. Man, I had it, Dadbeo, Naruto said, and Anko patted his shoulder. A small step back, Naru-kun. I honestly expected it to fall immediately, but you have some degree of control. I wonder why, Anko said, and Naruto scratched his head. Well, there were those times when I was being chased by a mob, and when they would nearly catch me I would almost immediately run so far ahead of them. Does that mean anything, Anko-ne? Naruto asked, and Anko narrowed her eyes. You must have unconsciously applied chakra to your feet to give you that extra speed. Civilians don't really know how to use chakra, so you could outrun them easily. I'm both amazed and angry at that, but not at you, so don't read too much into it. Anyway, that was a good try. Now Nai-chan said to try for 2 hours, so I'll watch you and correct you on anything I see that needs to be changed, Anko said, and Naruto nodded as he closed his eyes and tried the leaf exercise again. With Kurenai, the Chunin woman just got back to her house and opened the door. She quickly got all of her stuff together and got ready to leave. She had to meet up with Genma, Guy, and Kakashi. Out of them all, Kakashi and Guy were the only Jonin, while Genma and Kurenai were the Chunin, but Kurenai was possibly the only real Chunin since Genma said he was going to do the Jonin exams in the next month. Kurenai would have taken the exams also, but with her new responsibilities to Naruto, she knew that if she made Jonin, then she would be called out a lot more, and that would leave the village to chase him at their leisure, and she would be damned if that happened. Well, I guess I can wait till he's about 10 or so, then I can become a Jonin. For now, Naruto-kun is my primary concern, Kurenai said to herself before heading for the door. She opened the door and almost walked out before seeing 2 council members at her doorstep. They were Koharu and Homura. Kurenai-san, glad we caught you. May we have a word? They asked, and Kurenai narrowed her eyes. Her womanly instincts pointed this to Naruto or something that had to do with her adoptive son. Well, I'm kind of in a hurry so I can't really talk long, Kurenai said, and the two council members nodded. That's fine. We hope this won't take long either. So we'll get right to the point. We want you to relinquish Naruto Uzumaki from your care. No, Kurenai said just as fast as their request came out. Homura and Kaharu narrowed their eyes at her, and Kurenai stepped out of her doorstep and closed the door. Kurenai-san, you're a smart woman, so you should know that you can't raise him. He's not normal, Homura said, and Kurenai turned to them. I also don't think it's normal for people to maim a 6-year-old boy just because of hatred. Now then, if you're done, Kurenai said as she walked down the stairs and was about to leave while Kaharu sighed. That thing must be controlled, Kurenai-san. If we aren't careful, he'll destroy us all. You have to think about the safety of the village, Kaharu said, and Kurenai sighed. This was exactly why she wanted to wait for Naruto to grow a little, then for her to become a Jonin. It was all for the purpose of her to stay close to her son. Kurenai stopped walking and glared coldly at the two council members, making them both shiver. Never call my son a thing. He's Naruto Yuhi Uzumaki, and I'm not abandoning him for anything. I'd rather die, Kurenai said as she shunshined away from view. Kaharu and Homura narrowed their eyes and sighed. What do we do, Kaharu? Homura asked, and Kaharu sighed. I don't know. With two clans backing her up, Kurenai and Naruto are virtually untouchable, Kaharu said, and the two council members quickly walked off. Back with Naruto. The blonde sighed and panted while he laid on his back while Anko laughed at him. Naruto had done the leaf exercise down to 3 minutes, which was the optimum requirement for most academy students, so Anko took him to tree climbing, and the blonde's clothes were in tears. Wow, Naru-kun, you must have it rough, Anko said while the blonde glared at her. It's not funny, Anko, nay. Man, that hurt, Naruto said, rubbing his head, and Anko nodded while getting control of herself for a bit. Yeah, maybe it's beyond you at the moment. Let's get you started with my taijutsu. It's still a new form, but it's an effective one, Anko said, and Naruto nodded. He got to his feet while Anko slipped into her taijutsu form. This is all about movement and dancing around the opponent almost to taunt them. It also relies on being flexible, so let's go at it, Anko said, and Naruto nodded. He ran at Anko, and the Chunin chuckled as she trained her little brother. Anko was brutal. She really didn't hold back for Naruto, and the blonde was cursing her mentally at the moment. He had been kicked, punched, slapped, backslapped, and kneed in a certain place. He didn't know his sister could be so damn cold. Anko, nay, you're evil, Naruto said, panting, and Anko chuckled. Exploit all weaknesses, little brother. Now then, let's forget about ninjutsu tonight and simply taijutsu the day away, Anko said, and Naruto gulped. He hoped he would be alive enough to see his mother again, or this wasn't his day at all. Just like Anko said, they spared the day away, and not once did Naruto hit Anko. She was so damn slippery, just like a damn snake. His sister called her taijutsu form the hubby style, and Naruto could now see why she moved like a snake. She based her entire persona off of it. Anko taught Naruto the beginning katas to her form, and at the end of the day, when the sun was going down, they stopped with a little jutsu lesson. Needless to say, Naruto's clothes could almost be considered rags, and he was completely beat down, but the blonde smiled and hugged Anko. Thanks for the ouch training, Anko, nay. It really ouch feels good, Naruto said as it completely hurt to move his body. He had learned a lot from Anko, but at the end of the day his body was aching like hell. You're welcome, little brother. Now then, come on and get on my back, Anko said, and Naruto raised an eyebrow, to which Anko smirked. I know you can't move, so I'll piggyback to Nai-chan's house, Anko said, and Naruto slowly got on his surrogate older sister's back. Anko grinned as she trudged back to Kurenai's apartment. Anko, nay, Naruto said, and the snake mistress turned to him. What's up, Naru-kun? Anko asked as Naruto leaned on her back. He sighed and yawned. Sorry if it's personal, but where did you get this mark? Naruto asked, making Anko flinch as she felt Naruto touch her neck. She slowly calmed down and stopped walking. It's a story I'll tell you one day, but for now let's just say it's a scar, Anko said, and Naruto nodded, not wanting to interfere in his surrogate sister's privacy any more than he already did. Alright, Anko, nay. Just curious, Naruto said as he went to sleep on Anko's back, making the woman chuckle at how cute he could be. With Kurenai, the Chunin sighed as she came through the door of her apartment. Turns out that guard took longer than expected, since the nation's daimyo was right that his son would get attacked. They were mostly bandits scattered from the neighboring countries, but there was quite a bit, and it took all of them to hold the bandits back. They were only adequate fighters, so it didn't take that long to take them out. Kurenai had received her mission's payment and just wanted to relax on her couch, but she knew she couldn't just yet since Naruto wasn't back. She was about to get up again and go to the training area, but the door opened and Anko brought in Naruto on her back, and Kurenai immediately got worried when she saw how terrible the blonde looked. Anko, you didn't have to go that far, Kurenai said as she rested Naruto on the bed. Sorry about that, Nai-chan, but he's really persistent. He's gonna really be something in the future, Anko said, and Kurenai nodded in agreement. I guess now would be a good time for me to go to a new rank, Anko said, and Kurenai raised an eyebrow. I'm gonna help you take care of him. He's my family too, Nai-chan, Anko said, and Kurenai sighed. Well, that's all nice and good, Anko, but he needs to be alive for you to help him, Kurenai said, sending her friend a glare while Anko sheepishly chuckled. Kurenai shook Naruto awake and the blonde yawned. Ka-san, you're back, Naruto said, and Kurenai nodded. The mission wasn't as long as I thought. Well, go to bed, Naruto-kun, you look exhausted. We'll do your genjutsu training tomorrow, Kurenai told him, and the blonde nodded. He quickly got up and walked to his room. The blonde took off his clothes and took a quick shower, then went to bed just as easy, while Kurenai and Anko sat at the table in the kitchen. Nai-chan, I think I should give him the contract, Anko said, and Kurenai narrowed her eyes. Anko, I don't think he's ready for that. Maybe after a few years of training, but not right now, Kurenai said as she sipped some water. Anko sighed and tapped the table with her finger. I'm not saying it has to be now. I'm just saying that I would want to, Anko returned, and Kurenai sighed while holding her glass. I suppose that's a good idea, Kurenai said, and Anko nodded with a grin. I never would have thought that you would become a mother, even an adopted one, the snake mistress said, and Kurenai snorted. I know that's right, but it's fulfilling, Kurenai stated, and Anko nodded while laying her head on the table before looking at Naruto's door. She walked over to the door and slowly opened it to see Naruto sleeping soundly and closed the door. Well, our lives just got that much more exciting. So when are we going to tell Yugao about this? She'll have a fit, Anko said, and Kurenai knew that. Despite being the most composed one of the group, Yugao did tend to overreact to some things, but that's what made her fun. I don't know, but that's a situation for another time, Kurenai said, and Anko nodded in agreement with her. She could wait for now. Well, I guess I can go home now, Anko said, and Kurenai waved goodbye. Anko, thanks for being Naruto's sister, Kurenai said, making the snake mistress chuckle as she opened the door. As I told you, Nai-chan, I've always wanted a brother with whisker marks, Anko said as she left while Kurenai sighed. She began to wonder if this was something to worry about, but decided to let it go as she got up from her seat and walked towards her bedroom to go to sleep. She stopped to take a peek into Naruto's room and smile when she saw her son sleeping peacefully. Naruto Yuhi Uzumaki, I think that has a nice ring to it, Kurenai said with a nod as she closed the door and went to sleep. She couldn't wait to get Naruto's training done so she could be certain that he could protect himself. 1 year later, Naruto Yuhi Uzumaki, it's time to get up and go to the academy, Kurenai yelled and heard a crash from her son's room. She sighed as Naruto came out of the room and chuckled. Sorry about that, Ka-san. I'm still a heavy sleeper, Naruto said and Kurenai rolled her eyes. What am I going to do with you? Kurenai asked and Naruto shrugged his shoulders. He quickly ate his breakfast and put on his clothes. Naruto had gotten taller over the year. His blonde hair was more wild-looking and his body just a bit more developed thanks to Kurenai and Anko's training. He had also learned a lot much more than the average genin did. Thanks to his sister, Naruto developed completely in the hubby-style taijutsu. His moves were more fluid and he could spar with Anko a lot longer than he could a year ago. The blonde also gained a few jutsus underneath his belt and while they weren't his nature he still learned them for the sake of being well balanced. Much to Kurenai's happiness and relief Naruto, with time and chakra control, was able to use genjutsu. She could only be happy that the whole year wouldn't have to be repeated anymore. That was one of the hardest times she had tried to teach someone genjutsu and the chakra control Naruto needed was quite large for his age, but as expected of her son he did it all without fail. Kurenai also instilled in Naruto her dislike for perverts and the blonde had the same cold gaze that his mother had. Aside from Sarutobi, Kakashi, Anko, and a few other people no one knew that Naruto was adopted by Kurenai. She didn't feel the need to keep it a secret, but she thought that it might be best for Naruto if she didn't come completely out with it not that Naruto minded at all. To everyone else Kurenai was still the cold, untouchable woman that she always was, but in front of Naruto she was the nicest woman around. Kurenai was still a chunin and wanted to stay that way for about another year or so just to be sure for Naruto's safety. Anko had been promoted to Tokubetsu Jonin and started to work in the interrogation department with Ibiki or who Naruto called, Uncle Ibiki. Naruto only had a small group of friends, but they were still good friends nonetheless. Sasuke was more of a rival than a friend, but he appreciated having the Uchiha around. He also made friends with the Nara heir, Shikamaru Nara, the Inuzuka heir, Kiba Inuzuka. He was sort of acquaintances with the Aburame heir, Shino and the Akamichi heir, Choji. He tried to be friends with the Hyuga heir, but she always ended up fainting so Naruto sort of stopped going at her. Alright Ka-san, I'm leaving, Naruto said and Kurenai nodded. She gave him his lunch and the blonde left. Have a good day Naruto-kun, Kurenai said as she looked out the window and saw Naruto running for the school. I guess I can take the Jonin exam soon. I heard Makoto would be a Jonin sensei. I wonder if I should be one also, Kurenai thought as she sipped her coffee. Soon there was a knock on her door and the genjutsu mistress opened it. Hey Nai-chan, Anko said coming in and Kurenai waved. Is Naru-kun gone? Anko asked and Kurenai sighed with a nod. Well he'll be fine though Nai-chan watch the academy. Who knows what they'll try with Naru-kun, Anko warned and Kurenai took that warning to notice. I know that's why I told one of the chunin who knows Naruto. He's Iruka Yumino. He'll watch Naruto-kun for me and report to me if anything happens that looks weird, Kurenai said and Anko nodded. Then send them to me and I'll make them straighten up, Anko said while Kurenai chuckled. Your definition of straightening up is very twisted Anko, Kurenai retorted and Anko scoffed. How mean Nai-chan, Anko said and Kurenai giggled before she went to get dressed also. She had a long day of missions to do with Anko and now was the perfect time to get them done. She also couldn't wait to give Naruto something very special. So Anko, do you think he'll like it? Kurenai asked and Anko nodded. I know he will Nai-chan. With it he'll be quite the ninja. I can't wait to see people's reactions, Anko said and Kurenai nodded in agreement with her. Her son would really be quite the shinobi. She could attest to that after all. Konoha Academy. Naruto walked side as he walked through the door of the academy. It was his first day to the school in order for him to make his mother proud and become a shinobi. He had made his friends prior to the academy, so this would be the first time that he would be seeing them all. I guess I'll get a move on, Naruto said as he came up to his room. Naruto opened the door, but he was surprised when he saw no one was there. He was probably the first to arrive to the class, so the blonde chose a seat near the window and stayed there as he waited for other people to arrive. It had been over 45 minutes for Naruto, making the blonde narrow his eyes, but then the door opened, making Naruto jump. He turned to see Sasuke come through the door. Naruto was more than happy to have someone in the room with him and grinned. "Hey Tem, how are you today?" Naruto asked in a smug way while Sasuke grinned at his rival. He'd been training with him mother a lot before the academy just so he could kick Naruto's one day and prove he was the best between them. "Hey loser. So it looks like we're the first to arrive," Sasuke said, making Naruto nod in agreement with him. Sasuke sat in a seat row below Naruto and took out a book about shuriken techniques. Naruto seemed vaguely interested in the book, but he pulled out his own book, which was entitled, Chunin Chakra Control Exercises. The two boys spent their time waiting for everyone to arrive and simply sat in silence as they read through their books. With Kurenai. Inside the mission room was Kurenai, Asuma and Genma. The three were standing in front of their Hokage waiting for their mission to be given to them. Kurenai had taken a small leave to watch Naruto the past year, so now she wanted to earn more experience so she could start becoming a Jonin. "Alright, I'm glad you could all make it. Your mission is to guard supplies that are being shipped to our daimo's location. It might be targeted by thieves. You're to leave in the next 15 minutes, Sarutobi said, and everyone nodded with their individual bows. "Yes, Hokage-sama," they all said as they started to leave. "Ah, Kurenai-san. Please stay behind," Sarutobi said, making Kurenai raise an eyebrow, but she nodded and closed the door. "Yes, Sarutobi-sama," Kurenai asked, making it known that she would only say that when they were alone, which Sarutobi didn't mind at all. He really rather welcomed it, to say the least. "Well, Kurenai-san, I know you had Naruto-kun start the academy, and I just want you to know that until today I had made the council swear not to talk about Naruto-kun's adoption. I figured your life and his life would be made easier like that, but now it will be public knowledge. I just want to know if you're prepared for that," Sarutobi said, and Kurenai smiled. "It's alright, Sarutobi-sama. I have Anko watching the place when she's not busy, and we haven't been idle with Naruto-kun either. Granted, he's only about genin level at the moment, he can still be quite the shinobi when he wants to. I know he can. He's my son after all," Kurenai said as she knew that Sarutobi had stopped the spread of rumors about her and Naruto, and while she was grateful for it, she didn't really think it was necessary. She knew it would be public knowledge about this time and most people would be surprised, but that was alright, she figured. "Well, if that's all, Hokage-sama, I'm gonna go," Kurenai said, and Sarutobi nodded with smile on his face as he saw Kurenai leave. Back at the academy. "Okay, I am happy to see some new faces in the room. I know we will have a good year as we prepare you for your first step to becoming shinobi," Iruka said, making all the kids smile and slightly cheer. It had been a while, but Naruto and Sasuke had seen everyone else come in and calmly waited for the teachers. Seeing most of his friends, Naruto gestured for them over to his seat, which came to be Shikamaru sitting next to Naruto while Kiba was next to Shikamaru. Above Naruto was Shino, Choji, and Hinata. Right below the blonde was Sasuke, and a new face that the blonde had never seen before, which was Ino Yamanaka. Right next to her was a pink-haired girl who was seethed at the Yamanaka air for some odd reason, to which made Sasuke sigh. "Hey Sasuke, what's up with those two?" Naruto asked, and Sasuke rolled his eyes while glaring at the two girls in question. Who knows? I'm trying to ignore them at the moment, the Uchiha said, and Naruto chuckled at him for sounding like that. He wondered if those girls had a small infatuation with Sasuke, but then he turned back to the front to listen to Iruka speak. Now then, before we begin the lesson, let's tell everyone our names, Iruka said, making everyone nod as the first person stood to their feet and announced their name. I'm Kaoru Yukio, the small girl said, making Iruka nod. This happened to everyone as it slowly came down through the list of academy students. It slowly got through to the group in the corner while Iruka told everyone to begin. I'm Hinata Hyuga. Nice tea to meet everyone, she said with a bow and sat down. Next to her was Shino as he stood to his feet. I'm Shino Aburame. Please treat me well, Shino said and sat down. I'm Choji Akamichi. It's great to be here, Choji said, rubbing his head as he sat back down while munching on some chips which he passed to Naruto, Kiba and Shikamaru a few times. I'm Kiba Inuzuka and I'm gonna be the best in this class, Kiba said while the little dog on his head, Akamaru, yipped in agreement. Next was Shikamaru, who lazily looked up from his desk. I'm Shikamaru Nara. This is such a drag, but since I'm here I guess I'll just deal with it, Shikamaru said before closing his eyes for a bit. Naruto chuckled at his friend and shook his head. As expected of the Naras. Great geniuses, but terribly lazy. It also dawned on Naruto that all Nara had some type of hot-headed woman. It must have been a Nara preference, Naruto figured. Realizing it was his turn, the blonde sighed and stood to his feet. He saw most of the kids glaring at him, but Naruto knew why. He knew that parents told their children to stay away from him since he was a bad influence, but it was amazing that all the clan heirs found no problem with, and neither did their parents. He wondered why that was, but he could think it over later. I'm Naruto Yuhi Uzumaki. I hope to learn a lot from all of you, Dadbeo, Naruto said, making most of the children widen their eyes. Yuhi. By any chance are you related to the famous genjutsu mistress, Kurenai Yuhi-sama? A girl said, and Naruto nodded his head. Yeah, I'm her son, Naruto said, making the entire class except for those who knew Naruto gasp out loud. Wait a minute. You're blonde and she isn't. You have blue eyes and hers are red. Plus the last part of your name. She's not an Uzumaki. Why don't you stop lying? One of the boys said while the other children nodded. Naruto rolled his eyes while the others came to his aid. It's true. We've heard Kurenai call him her son and he called her Ka-san. You guys should get your facts straight before you accuse someone, Shikamaru said while Naruto shrugged his shoulders. I said what I wanted to. That's all, Naruto said, sitting down while Iruka rubbed his temples and told for the next person to announce their name. I'm Sakura Haruno. Nice to meet everyone, she said, smiling, and next to her was Ino. I'm Ino Yamanaka. Hello, she said with her quick introduction and sat back down. Next was the person who made most of the girls giggle and smile. I'm Sasuke Uchiha, the brunette said simply and sat down. He just wanted to get things over with, so he didn't bother with the pleasant greeting. Iruka nodded with the last person announcing his name and smiled. Alright, now that we have all announced ourselves, we will start learning about the history of the village, Iruka said, effectively making all the students groan while Iruka chuckled before he started writing on the board. It was a long time, but the bell rang and Iruka stopped talking. Alright everyone. We will now have lunch, and after that I will be teaching you what a kunai and shuriken is, then we will try a little target practice, Iruka said, and everyone nodded while getting up from their seats. Naruto had left the room and out into the yard. He sat on a simple bench and leaned back. He had never been so bored in his life with that little lecture. Sure, history was important, but damn, it could be boring. The blonde sighed one more time and pulled out his lunch, which consisted of some rice balls, chicken and some cooked rice. Thank you for the food, Ka-san, Naruto said and started eating his mother's cooking, which was always good to him. Hey Naruto, so this is where you ran off to? Kiba said, interrupting the blonde as he swallowed his food. Naruto also saw Shino, Shikamaru, and Choji coming along with him. Hey guys. Just wanted some quiet, I guess, Naruto said as he placed some chicken in his mouth. Where are Hinata, Sakura, and Ino? The blonde asked, and Shino slightly adjusted his glasses. They went to have lunch together. We offered for them to join us, but Ino said that girls should spend time together, so they took off, Shino said while Naruto wondered what that was all about, but he didn't care. By then he noticed Kiba looking around. Where's Sasuke? Kiba asked, and Naruto pointed up, making the 4C Sasuke eating his lunch while he leaned on a tree. He's been there for about 5 minutes, I guess, Naruto said as he continued eating. Kiba and Shikamaru's sweat dropped, but they all stopped talking and continued on with their lunch break, which was relatively quiet. Behind the academy, it had been 5 minutes since everyone had finished their lunch break, and they were all in the back with a new face alongside Iruka. Alright everyone. This is my partner, Mizuki. Now then, we'll begin the lesson. Can any of you tell me what a kunai is? Iruka asked, and someone raised their hand. A tiny knife that shinobi used to pull off awesome attacks. Someone asked, making Iruka and Mizuki chuckle. That's the generally idea. A kunai is a shinobi's main weapon of choice. There are many things you can learn to do with kunai. You can throw them, use them for traps, and fight with them. The possibilities for kunai are endless. Now then, we will practice throwing them. Who would like to go first? Iruka asked. No one seemed that eager since they never held a kunai before in their life, but someone had to go, so Iruka sighed. Alright then, I'll pick. Naruto, why don't you give it a try? Iruka asked, and the blonde stood to his feet. Sasuke paid special attention to this one as a small grin appeared on his face. Iruka gave Naruto the kunai and pointed towards a target. Naruto nodded, but also didn't miss the small glare he was getting from Mizuki. It made Naruto sigh that even the teachers hated him. Hit the target as best you can, Naruto, Iruka told him. Naruto nodded and mentally thanked Anko for teaching him about kunai and what you could do with them. Of course, she taught him to be creative with them also, which earned her a small smack on the head from Kurenai at the time. Naruto threw the kunai at the dummy target, and it amazed Iruka and even Mizuki that the blonde had such a good execution. The kunai embedded itself in the exact center of the target while Naruto smiled. How is that, Iruka-sensei? Naruto asked, and Iruka nodded. Everyone widened their eyes at Naruto's accomplishment as the blonde sat back down. Kiba leaned next to him and whispered. Where do you learn to do that? Kiba asked, and Naruto grinned. I learned how to throw them a year ago, Naruto said, and Kiba pouted, which followed a small mutter of, show off, making Naruto smirk. Sasuke then rose his hand that he would like to try, and Iruka allowed it. You can do it, Sasuke-kun. Sakura yelled before Iruka shushed her so that Sasuke could concentrate. The Uchiha thanked his sensei before looking back at the target. He had been training with his mother and he knew he had improved. He wouldn't fall behind Naruto at all. Sasuke threw the kunai at the target and it came to the center also. Most of the girls cheered for the Uchiha as he sat down. The entire period went on like this as Sasuke and Naruto tried to one-up each in just about everything. They were rather amusing to watch for everyone else. Before anyone knew it, the day at the academy was over for everyone, with Mizuki asking one last question. So does everyone know what today is? Mizuki asked, and all the students raised their eyebrows before someone stood to their feet. It's the festival day, right? When the Yondaime took down the Kyuubi and saved the village, one of the kids said, making Naruto narrow his eyes. He had known about Kyuubi as when he asked Kurenai and Anko had told him the entire thing. Naruto had been quite depressed that last year, but Kurenai kept telling him that he was nothing like Kyuubi and that he would always be her son, so Naruto eventually got out of it. Today was his birthday, and while no one really appreciated it, there was something good about it. That's right. So enjoy the festival for all it's worth, Mizuki said as he left laughing, but Iruka could hear the disdain in that talk. He sighed and rubbed his head. He'd have to have a talk with Mizuki when he had the chance. Well, on that note, class is over everyone. Enjoy the festival and someone's birthday, Iruka said, making all the kids nod as they ran out the door as they couldn't wait to wear their kimonos and go to the festival. Meanwhile, Naruto got up to his feet and turned to Kiba. Hey guys, wanna get something to eat? Naruto asked, but Kiba shook his head. Sorry Naruto, I've got practice today, Kiba said as he walked out. Everyone followed him, leaving Naruto in the room. The blonde sighed and rubbed the back of his head. Yeah, I was going home anyway, Naruto said to himself as he walked out the room. As he exited the door, Naruto saw Iruka behind the doorway smiling at him. Hey Naruto, are you going home? Iruka asked and Naruto nodded. He gave a small sigh, but Iruka continued to smile. Hey, why don't I treat you to some ramen? I'd like to get to know some of my students, Iruka said, mainly because he was afraid of Naruto getting attacked on his way home while Kurenai was gone, but the blonde didn't seem to pick up on that. Alright Iruka-sensei, I guess we can go, Naruto said as the two walked towards Ichiraku Ramen, Naruto's #1 spot to eat other than what his mother cooked. It was obvious to the two that they were being glared at, mostly Naruto, more than usual. It was a lot more anger-filled than before, but Naruto knew why. Trying to change the mood in the air, Iruka decided to speak. So Naruto, how are you so good with a kunai? You really surprised me, Iruka said, and Naruto slightly smiled. Ka-san taught me. She and Anko have been training me for a year now, so I know a bit, Naruto said, and Iruka widened his eyes. He didn't know that Naruto was being trained by Anko or Kurenai. He did know that Kurenai adopted Naruto, but didn't think she would train him. No wonder he hit the target with that kunai so easily. Wow, well, I can't slack off on you. Sasuke's getting trained by his mother and you're getting trained by your mother. I must say that you're amazing, Iruka said, and Naruto thanked him. After walking for a bit longer, the two came up to the shop and settled inside. Hey Tuki Oji-san, can you get me some ramen? Naruto asked, and the old man behind the counter smiled at his favorite customer. Sure kid, whatever you want today I'll make it for ya, Tuki said, making the blonde's face light up like a small light. Iruka chuckled at him as Tuki brought them 3 bowls of ramen. 2 for Naruto and 1 for Iruka. Eat up, he said, and the two dug in. Naruto instantly slurped up his noodles since he could never do it if his mother was with him. Heck, she wasn't afraid to hit him on the head for slurping his food. Iruka merely chuckled at him and he continued to his own bowl while he watched Naruto eat his food. The two ate in relative silence and simply enjoyed their food. They didn't talk about much except for being glad to know that the other would be teaching. When all was said and done, Iruka left Naruto alone and the blonde walked off. He had nothing to do since his mother was gone, so he decided to head home and get some rest before Anko came home. The walk was sort of short, for Naruto walked up the stairs and came up to his mother's apartment. He had been given a key and the blonde was about to open the door, but then he felt a hand wrap over his shoulder. Hey Ototo, how are you doing? Anko asked, surprising him. Hey Anko, I was just finished with my first day at the academy, so I thought I'd get some rest before practicing, Naruto said, and Anko grinned like she always did. Well, sorry, but you're practicing now with Nei-chan. You can rest all day, but training is forever, Anko said as she dragged Naruto away. The blonde sighed as he couldn't go home, but he knew Anko was right. What he didn't know was that he saw Anko wipe her brow as she took him to the training field. Training field. Anko plopped Naruto on the ground and grinned while the blonde rubbed his head. Anko, nay, don't you have anything to do with Ibiki Oji? Naruto asked and Anko's smirk only widened. He's not in today, so I'm got the day off. Unless you don't want to learn a new jutsu from your Oni-chan, Anko said, and immediately Naruto shot up and grabbed Anko into a hug. Anko-chan, have I told you how much I love you, Dadbeo? Naruto said, and Anko rolled her eyes while she ruffled the blonde's hair. She could always get his attention with something like this any time of the day. Alright Naruto, I'll show you a new just you and we'll work on it into the night, alright? Anko asked and Naruto smiled with a nod. He could hardly wait for it. Alright, I know Nai-chan attempted to teach you the Bunshin technique, right? Anko asked and Naruto nodded. He had tried it before, but not matter how fine-tuned his chakra control was, he just couldn't deal with that jutsu. Alright then, I'll teach this to you. I learned it a few days ago and realized it would be perfect for a chakra house like you. Now watch me, Anko said as she crossed her fingers. Naruto raised an eyebrow as she yelled. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu, Anko said, and immediately a clone came next to her. Naruto figured it was an illusion, but he was shocked when he saw the clone move and it patted him on the head. Anko, nay, there's two of you? Naruto asked, and the two Ankos smiled at Naruto's confusion. That's the Kage Bunshin Jutsu, Naruto-kun. This is a step above the original. It can move, talk, fight, and do all the things that you can do. Obviously they require a lot more chakra, but for someone like you they are the perfect jutsu, Anko said, and Naruto's eyes gleamed. He immediately got to his feet and tried it. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu, Naruto yelled and allowed his chakra to flow for a while. Soon 3 clones appeared next to him and Naruto jumped up and down while Anko's eyebrow twitched. She worked on that technique for 3 hours. When she found out about the technique and just seeing her hand signs, Naruto got it in under 10. Kami, you are so not fair, Anko said in thought while Naruto and his clones conversed, but then Anko brought them all to attention. Well, since you seemingly have that down, we'll go on with one more jutsu that I'll teach you, Anko said, and she touched the ground. She held up a single hand sign and yelled. Ninpo. Shin no Otoshiana, ninja art. Pitfall of death, Anko yelled as the ground in front of her split into a hole that Naruto tried to see the bottom, but he couldn't. Don't be fooled, Naruto. You might not see anything, but down there are thousands of kunai that will really cause you some pain. Do you want to jump inside? Anko asked, and as she did she saw Naruto whistling all the way next to a tree quite a few ways from her. Oh come on. I wouldn't really push you down there. Nai-chan would kill me, Anko said, and Naruto warily walked over. In all honesty, this is probably a mid-C rank jutsu since it doesn't really use that much chakra, but that depends, Anko said, and Naruto raised an eyebrow. On what, Anko, nay? Naruto asked, and the snake mistress chuckled. Well, it depends on how much chakra you put into it and how deep you want the pit to be. It works like a charm though, Anko said, and Naruto stood in a space a bit further. So can I try it now? Naruto asked, and Anko nodded as she watched him go for it. Naruto had practiced the 2 new jutsu that Anko taught him, and while the Kage Bunshin was a piece of cake for him, the death trap that he tried to keep making wasn't. It was either too short or rough. Anko told him that the solid part was to make it long and steep so the person trapped inside wouldn't be able to use chakra to cling to the walls of the trap. The two had stayed out in the field for at least 4 hours and the sun was starting to go down for them while Konoha's lights went up and the small fireworks went up around the village, which made Anko smile. Anko, nay. I got it. Is this steep enough and long enough? Naruto asked and Anko looked down the hole. She whistled at it and made a cage bunshin and ordered it to go down the hole, which the clone refused, but Anko pushed it down there and it was quite a drop down, only for Anko to receive a painful memory filled with kunai spikes embedded in her back, which made her shiver slightly. Nice job, Naruto. That's the ideal pit. Now keep practicing it and I'll teach you the next step to it, Anko said and Naruto nodded. By the time the blonde noticed, it was dark inside. He really didn't have anything planned for his birthday, but that was alright. Well, Naruto, shall we go home? I'm sure Nai-chan is back and wondering where you are. Anko snickered, which made Naruto nod, though he glared at her wondering what was so funny, but Anko didn't say anything as they almost left the field. Naruto suddenly stopped as he looked at the ground for a second. It seems to move for a bit as he looked down. Anko followed his eyes and saw an injured snake on the ground. Anko raised an eyebrow while Naruto gazed at it. It was probably a mild wound, but he still felt a bit of sympathy for it. Don't get too close, Naruto-kun. It's poisonous, Anko said and Naruto chuckled. He knew she didn't mean that, but he saw the small irony in it. The snake turned to Naruto and forked its tongue at him as a warning. The blonde didn't seem intimidated by it and let out his hand, which made the snake hiss. He waved his hand left and right while the snake watched him, but Naruto could see it was still injured as it hissed to him. Anko simply continued to watch the blonde do whatever he was doing and watched as he snaked his other hand around the snake's head and gently petted it. Anko was about to warn Naruto, but she was amazed when the snake didn't strike the blonde and simply took in his scent with its tongue. The snake slowly stopped hissing as Naruto rubbed the back of its head. On a closer inspection, Naruto could see that the snake had black, scaly skin with a red diamond pattern going down its back. It really looked beautiful when brought to the light. It was rather an average-sized snake, Anko figured, and it was about the entire length of Naruto's arm. Anko, nay, think you can heal a snake? Naruto asked and Anko narrowed her eyes at the blonde. You think that just cause I'm called the snake mistress I can heal a snake? Anko asked and Naruto gulped. She smiled as she looked through her trench coat for a bandage and some disinfectant. The snake watched Anko cautiously as she sprayed the disinfectant over the snake's wound. The snake hissed a bit and forked its tongue at her. Anko stuck her tongue back at it and placed a bandage over the snake's wound. There, he should be fine. Snakes can regenerate fast when they want to, Anko said and Naruto nodded. It was then that the snake slid up Naruto's arm, surprising the blonde and Anko as it snaked around his neck. It didn't try to strangle him, but just kept firm on it. It seems he likes you, Anko said and Naruto turned to the snake. The snake forked its tongue at him as it started to slither around his arm for a bit. I think so too. What should call him? Naruto asked and Anko chuckled, but remembered to take Naruto home. As they walked home, both Naruto and Anko tried to come up with a name for the snake that had taken a small liking to Naruto as they appeared in front of Kurenai's apartment. I think Kurai is a good name, Naruto said as he opened the door with his key. Anko was grinning like mad when he opened the door. It was completely dark as Naruto walked inside as Anko closed the door. Surprise and happy birthday, Naruto! People yelled, shocking Naruto, who really jumped out of his skin. Kiba, Shino, Shikamaru, Choji, Sasuke and Hinata in the room along with Kurenai, Sarutobi, Tsuki, Ayame, Ibiki, and Makoto. Happy birthday, Naruto-kun, Kurenai said, giving Naruto a hug. She had noticed the snake around his arm and admitted she was sort of worried, but the snake didn't do anything as it flicked its tongue at her. She had been around Anko all the time, so being around a snake was almost no surprise to her. Where'd you get the snake, Naru-kun? Kurenai asked and Naruto softly petted the snake's head, making everyone else glare at it. I found it in the forest. Anko ne helped it and it likes me. Think I could keep it? Naruto asked and Kurenai raised an eyebrow. Sasuke, Shino and Shikamaru gazed at the snake for a bit longer. Well, it is your birthday, so I guess you can, Kurenai said, and Naruto thanked his mother. It was then that Naruto turned to his friends. When did you guys get here? Naruto asked while Sasuke rolled his eyes. Please, loser, Ka-san made me come. She said rivals go to each other's birthday for some reason, Sasuke said, and Naruto grinned when he saw Makoto wink at him. She, of course, knew about Sasuke's rivalry to Naruto and thought that her son could use the good competition. It would be great for Sasuke to forget that night. We got here about half an hour ago. Kurenai-san had us put up these decorations. Kiba had been a little obvious back at the academy, but we pulled it off, Shikamaru said, rubbing the back of his head. Naruto smiled with a nod as Ayame and Tuki brought a chocolate cake in front of the blonde. It might have been the day of the festival for Kyuubi's defeat and that was good reason to celebrate, but for everyone else a birthday was just as good to them. Happy birthday Naruto-kun, Ayame said, and everyone gathered around Naruto. There were 8 candles and the blonde smile again. Blow them out, Naruto, so I can have some of that cake, Choji said, drooling, and just as easily the blonde blew the candles out and everyone clapped for him. Now that he's 8, I think I'll start with my present, Anko said as she bit her thumb. Everyone watched as she went through her hand signs and hit the ground. Immediately there was a poof on the ground which brought out a large scroll in front of Naruto. Naru-kun, this is a big gift that Nai-chan and I talked about it a year and a half ago. I told her that you should sign this like your Nai-chan. So Naruto-kun wanna be a snake summoner? Anko asked while Sarutobi grinned. He could only imagine if Minato and Kushina could see Naruto now. Anko ne, are you sure I can? Naruto asked, and Anko turned to the snake that was still wrapped around his arm while it forked its tongue out. Oh, I'm sure. You seem to have a real gift with snakes. I think your friend there can agree, Anko said, making everyone smile while Kurenai patted Naruto's shoulder. Go on, Naruto. It would also mean much to Anko if you did, Kurenai said to her son, and the blonde saw Anko stutter while she insisted that it wasn't true, but to her it'd be nice if she wasn't the only one who had this contract with them besides her and him. Alright, where do I sign, Anko ne? Naruto asked, and Anko unfurled the scroll. Right here. Just bite your thumb then trace your name into the paper, Anko said, and Naruto nodded. He knelt down and bit his thumb, then wrote his name over the scroll. It glowed for a bit then faded. Soon a snake came out in a dark green hexagonal pattern. SSSO, you're our newest SSS summoner, right? How nice, the female-sounding snake said, and Naruto blinked. Nice to meet you. I hope to do good with the snakes, Naruto said, and the snake smiled while she looked at the snake around Naruto's arm. Well, the girl on your arm like SSSSS you enough. SSS, she says that wants to thank you for helping her, the snake said, and Naruto widened his eyes. So this was a girl he had on his arm. How cool was that? Well, thank you. Anything I should know? Naruto asked, and the snake woman shook her head. No, not really. Just be kind to USSSS and we'll be kind to you, the snake said as she bowed and disappeared. Naruto then looked back at the snake on his arm and smiled. I got it. Your name will be Makata, Naruto said, and the snake forked her tongue at him. Everyone thought over the word and found that it meant Ali in kanji. Makoto giggled at the idea while Makata slithered into Naruto's jacket, and the blonde giggled when he felt her ball up and rest near his body. Well, that's my gift, Naruto-kun. Now then, anyone else? Anko asked, and soon everyone stepped forward. Kiba gave Naruto a scroll about taijutsu while Sasuke gave Naruto a demon wind shuriken that was special to his clan. It was made of a special metal that made it almost unbreakable to any type of attack. There were only 10 in the whole clan, so Sasuke gave one away to Naruto. Enjoy if loser. I'll be sure to fight you with one, so don't hold back, Sasuke said with a small grin, and Naruto nodded at him. Hinata and Shino had gotten Naruto a book and some ointment, which both were said to be bestsellers. Choji and Shikamaru gave Naruto, with their parents' help, an exclusive kunai and shuriken set with some high-grade metals. Hope you like them. It's not hard to know what you like, Shikamaru said, rubbing the back of his head with a yawn while Naruto shook his head. Next was Ibiki, who had given Naruto some Jonin wire. It was used mainly for trapping someone, but it was still a great gift from the head of interrogation. After him was Tuki and Ayame, who gave Naruto a small coupon for a month of free ramen, to which Naruto would take extreme advantage of. Second to last was Sarutobi, and the old Hokage smiled as he gave Naruto a single kunai. It was three-pronged, making everyone look at the kunai funny, but Makoto widened her eyes and simply turned to Sarutobi. Are you sure about this? Makoto asked, and Sarutobi nodded. One piece of his heritage, Makoto-san. A few years at a time, Sarutobi said, and Makoto shrugged. She wouldn't tell her Hokage what to do. When Naruto was done with his gifts, Kurenai came up to the blonde and gently smiled. She gave him a piece of cloth and the blonde unfurled it. He widened his eyes at what was inside. They were two short blades, each about the half the length of his arm. They were Kodachi, and Naruto loved them. Lots of genjutsu users and ninjutsu users have these. Most prefer kunai to these, but this is the standard, Kurenai said, and Naruto hugged his mother. Thank you, Ka-san, I love them, Naruto said, and soon enough the blonde and everyone else saw a small fire in the village. Everyone looked while Sarutobi, Naruto, Anko and Kurenai widened their eyes. It was Naruto's old apartment that was on fire, and Naruto frowned. You don't live there. You live with me, Naruto. I promise they won't hurt you. Not that they could, Kurenai said, and Naruto's face brightened. Well, we're going to go now. Enjoy your birthday, Naruto, Shikamaru said, and people started to leave. Anko also left, leaving Naruto, Kurenai and Mikata in the room. Never imagined this, Ka-san, Naruto said, and Kurenai nodded with she drank some water. Naruto was drinking some juice. He could feel Mikata's coils against his body and chuckled. He really did like snakes after all. So, Ka-san, are you going to be a Jonin now? Naruto asked, and Kurenai set her cup down. That's right, Naruto-kun. I'm going to be a Jonin. I'll be busy a lot more, but Anko stays pretty close to the village, so you'll be fine with her, right? Kurenai asked, and Naruto nodded. That's right, Ka-san. Now then, I'm going to take Mikata to bed. See you tomorrow, Naruto said, and Kurenai nodded. She smiled at seeing her son leave the room while she looked out the window. She gazed and saw the village in an uproar for the celebration, while Kurenai's gaze turned cold. I'm gonna have to find out who did that. Even if he doesn't live there, no one does that to my son, Kurenai said in thought as she finished her drink. She turned out the lights and went to sleep also.